first announced the curse tablet about a year and a half ago. So we were looking at 2022 on a discovery that actually occurred several years before. When did they actually find it? It was they found it at of course, Mount Ebal, but they
Right,
excavated the debris pile left by Adam Zertal back in the 1980s,
right.
and he excavated from 1982 to around 1989, and actually there's several books out that he has. I think the one is called something like The Rising of a Nation or something very similar to that. And he talks about the discovery of Mount Ebal, and which they call the Joshua's altar.
Right.
But the announcement was actually at Leonard Theological Library outside Houston, Texas. But the actual discovery was what, about 2 years before, something like that,
Yeah, I think it was 2019, 2018, 2019. I think is
something like that.
when they found it, but due to, restrictions both within um, Palestine, Israel, but also COVID, the world shut down. They had a hard time processing everything, along with, I think they have to get special permits and paperwork to be able to ship artifacts like that out. So it took them that long, what, 2, 3 years before they could actually get anything out.
Mm. Right. And they were, since it's a folded lead tablet, you just couldn't open it and read it.
Right.
They had to use a specific type of like CT scanning, which was called the tomography.
Right.
And so they're reading layers, which would be actually possibly difficult, different type of technology. And it had, I believe, 48 letters, which actually spelled out curse, curse, curse many, many times.
Right.
And what I thought was interesting, though, was Adam Zertal in his excavation. Now, the scholars did not debate the technique that they used. They did not debate his studying of the pottery typology, not
Right.
at all. Even the scarabs that were found and excavated that were dated to the 19th dynasty, scholars were okay with that too, right?
Yeah.
And what was that date that they agreed on? They agreed from late Bronze Age 2A, which was around 1250 or 1260, to Iron Age 1 around 1150.
Yeah.
That was his date. And peer review agreed with it. The thing they didn't agree with is what it was. Was it? But they really didn't agree with the cultic altar at all. That was shot down, and there was a reason for it. Um, I don't know if well, one of the reasons is the distance from the ceremonial site of Mount Gerizim, and then you have Shechem in the middle, then you have
Right.
Mount Ebal. And if we go to, let's say, the Mount Ebal, where if we look at that through an aerial view, which we can easily see in different pictures on Google Images, that is almost like a theater setting. So I could understand using that theater setting for the ceremony, but the altar itself is like 1.5 kilometers away, and another 1 point, well, no, 140 meters downhill. That's like having the altar of your church a mile and a half away on the other side of the hill. Now, that didn't make sense. So, what Adam Zertel actually proposed was that the mountain Gerizim, where the Samaritans built their temple. Remember, Jesus met the woman at the well, and she's
Right.
talking about, where should we worship? On this mountain, right? Or on the one in Jerusalem? And then Jesus says, neither, but in your minds and in your hearts, that's where you'll find God. But anyway, the Samaritans had their temple on Mount Gerizim. Well, Adam Zertal understood the difficulties of the, I'll just say, altar or the cultic installation being so far away. So he proposed that Mount Gerizim was only traditional. During the time of Joshua, it was another mount, Mount Kabir, just north of the altar. Did you know that? Did you realize that?
I did not.
Well, so anyway, that's a number one reason it got shot down. This is like, how can the altar be so far away and on the other side of the mountain? Now, I had a chance to go there, but it's a restricted military zone to go there.
Oh, wow.
So you're going into what we would call a zone C in the West Bank territory. Now, I didn't do it just because it was too complicated, and you only got so much time when you're in Israel and you're taking a trip. Do I really want to go see? I wasn't going to go see this particular site for being Joshua's altar. I'd go to that location for the archaeological importance of it. That's it, right?
Right.
That's it. But however, I don't want to use up your time because I really were interested in what you have to think, because you changed your mind, which I think is fantastic that you were able to do that. But Dr. Stripling stated that outside of Adam Zertal's dating, he comes up with a date of what we call late Bronze Age 2A, which would be 1400 BC, which is 150 years earlier than the proposed date by Adam Zertal, which all scholars, secular or not, agreed with at that time.
You're talking about they
I
agreed
thought-
with Zertal's?
They agreed with Zertal.
Right.
1250, yes. Okay. So anyway, that's my little spiel to help set this rolling a little bit. That we have a situation which I think we got a huge biblical bias going on. You know, why are you changing these dates? Why are you changing the dates of these scarabs that scholars have already seen 40 years ago?
Right.
All right. And want to place it 1400 BC. What's so important about 1400 BC? Well, if you take the scriptural narrative extremely literal, and we take the Exodus at 1446, thereabout,
Right.
in the 18th dynasty, and we have to, and then since we're taking it literal, we have 40 years, actual 40 years wandering in the wilderness. Then we place the entering into Canaan and the conquest somewhere around 1400 BC. That's why it's important.
Correct.
That's what I believe. Now, if that's the case, wow, you're overlooking. I shouldn't say overlooking. I don't want to be unfair, but we have so much archaeological data that to make that type of decision baffles me. You know,
Right. So
go for it.
you mentioned the redating of the scarabs. I think what I thought about his dating was he focused more on the lead itself and his analysis of the lead and how it came from that Aegean lead mine.
They
And
call it Labrion.
right, along with how like the imports, exports, and when that would have started or ended from that region into Israel, or at least areas around that. I thought that was interesting. And I think if he were to base his date on that, on when he thinks the lead should have entered, therefore, if it's buried around a similar time, the date for writing whatever inscription might be on that tablet, that seemed more solid to me than redating, like you said, something that may have had a better consensus. So I think that was a better point to his argument on trying to date the site around the lead. And I thought that was quite interesting. I haven't heard anyone speak against this. I've heard it mainly talking about the content of the inscription that was debated, or if there's an inscription at all, rather than what he was dating. I don't know if you've heard anything on the discussion of the lead.
Sure, I have. But anyway, that's a good question because he did emphasize on the lead. However, lead, like gold or like silver, can be reused over and over again, and lead is extremely malleable. The mine in Labrion was used in the late Bronze Age. That's true, but it also continued to be used in the Iron Age up to the 5th century. So, with a large, expansive date of the use of the mines in Labrion, all right, just to point out and say this dates to the late Bronze Age. I think it's to me leading the listener
Yeah. And so I think if he doesn't have that point about timing, and I could be incorrect about this. I think he ties it to whether it's a list of imports or a knowledge of traffic, like trade routes, that the import of lead or materials products from that mine stopped and at
Right.
a specific point, or at least was more prominent during a certain point. And so he was tying it to that rather than just redating it because he wanted to. I think if he doesn't have that information, that trade route, it's very it's very hard to make that argument. It could be, but have a lot of you don't have very good footing for that. So I think if the trade
Okay.
route information is correct, that gives a little more push to his argument.
All right. Fair enough. So we also have what do we call it? Let's say the type of writing that's on it. That's what's
Yeah.
going to be important, is it not? Because he called it at first, it was a proto alphabetic Hebrew.
Yes.
And actually, I never heard before that the term proto alphabet. Sure. Proto Canaanite. Yes. Proto alphabet Hebrew. Sorry, not that one. I think it was used. So if we hear the word Hebrew, that ties into Joshua and ties into the altar. So therefore, it must be those guys, you know. But
Yes.
now that we have the publication out, and it was kind of in an odd journal as well. It seemed like a journal that would be discussing, like you said, the actual metal being used, the product, you know, being
Right.
analyzed, rather than the archaeological find itself and uh, uh, other epigraphers to jump in on this. Which, if we've
Yeah.
been following this on YouTube, they jumped in anyway, right?
They did. Yeah. So I thought speaking of the journal he chose, what's interesting, I watched several interviews with him, and he was being interviewed by YouTube channels or apologists or other archaeologists. There were several of those that I watched, and then having watched just other channels who were interviewing epigraphers and archaeologists or just historians, people who are on YouTube talking about these topics. Um, the focus of the conversations was completely different. So Dr. Stripling focused heavily on the criticisms being brought up about the type of journal
Right.
and why he did it this way or that way, the metal, the tomographic scanning, and I honestly had no issue with the scanning part because I've seen other inscriptions where they've shown clear markings. I think one was
Mhm.
a form of Greek or Latin or something, and you could see the lettering. It was like this makes sense on why you went this route because, like you said, if you crack this open, you're probably going to lose anything that might be in on the inside. But then the other individuals who were talking about this, they didn't. They mentioned the journal, and like you said, they thought this was odd, um, and there might be some poor reasoning and maybe even a way to get around some peer review. But yeah, it's all you're not sure. You don't know motive, but they focused more on the epigraphy, on the writing, on the interpretation of the writing, and what the symbols look like. And it didn't seem like the others with Dr. Stripling that they talked about that at all. I wanted to hear him. I wanted to hear him what he had to say about why
Right.
Galil, why the epigraphers thought why they thought. Can you point out certain pictures and certain symbols and show me how you got to that? They
Right.
didn't. I'm sure there might be some. I hadn't seen them. I was looking for them when this came out, and so I ended up finding myself following where the evidence led, which was more against his interpretation. I There might be some letters there. I think there were maybe a few that weren't obvious, just impressions in lead from it being smashed or covered with debris. Um, but it was really hard when they showed you the route of interpretation of the lettering
Oh, the
and
route.
yeah
That's
it
interesting. They call that meandering.
the the
What they
by the ox or the axe plows back
uh,
and forth or whatever.
Bostrophenon. That's it's supposed to be
Yes,
like a Bostrophenon.
right,
That's
which
one way of. Yeah. But his was like, what did Dr. Robert Hargill, he said, a drunken ant at a picnic. That was his
Yes.
explanation. I heard
Yeah.
another scholar say something like it was an intoxicated camel wandering in the wilderness
Right. It's
because it goes all over the place at different levels because there's letters underneath letters.
right. Which we know that mediums of writing get reused, so that's fine. It's normally not metal, but again, trying to give benefit of the doubt. I always try to, and then see where the evidence leads. It's like, okay, maybe it's such a small tablet. Maybe they, it's really hard to write. Maybe they did write over it. That's fine. But you'd think as they're writing, if they're writing in the same route, you could follow the overwrite. You could
Okay,
figure
that's a
out the pattern.
good point. In working with museums, that's part of what I do. And actually, the preservation of artifacts. Sometimes, they do come in kind of crusty and they'd have dirt on them
Right.
or what we call patina. And sometimes if it gets bad, especially bronzes, it might even contain bronze disease, which we have to treat.
Okay.
And when we treat a bronze for bronze disease, we actually might lose the patina. It's like losing the green that's on a penny.
Right.
And of course, if you have an old penny, you really shouldn't move that patina because that's what gives it its significance, its age. But sometimes we can't help that. We got to preserve it from that bronze disease because bronze disease does not care if that item would be of like $300 or $300,000. It doesn't care. If you don't take care of it, it could be gone in a month. All right.
Okay.
So this is the fun part. In cleaning items, including this particular piece is an Egyptian faience cup. And as we cleaned it, I don't know if you can see the hieroglyphs on it.
Yeah.
Pretty clear. Now, this is sometimes the danger of wet sifting is that if they're writing on what we call ostracan, writing on a pottery, and you're wet sifting, you can actually scrub the ostracan clean. You know what I mean? That's part
Oh,
of the problem with wet sifting. So you dry sift to try to find the rarity of an ostracan that's writing on a pottery fragment.
right.
That's like sending a postcard in the ancient world. But then again, I'm wetting this down so that you can see what happens, how clear it is now.
Right.
My picture is very, very small, so I can't see if it's clear in my camera.
No, I can see it.
All right, so this is a way you can see if you know anything about hieroglyphs, just if you read it, anything on Egyptian history, you can see the clarity and the functionality of the hieroglyphs. It's not all over the place.
Right.
It's not meandered. Okay, here's another one. And this one was encrusted with the patina, very, very thick patina. And it's made of bronze and it's called an Egyptian situla. And it's from the Hellenistic period. So let's say 300 years BC, or for us, 2,300 years. And an Egyptian situla would be used, let's say, in a ritual of death, a
Okay.
ceremony where they're going to bury the dead. And it just happened to have bronze disease on it. So I was treating it and I wanted to be very, very careful because it's a very large situla made of bronze. And it took me 6 months to clean it.
Oh,
All
wow.
right. And as I was cleaning it, I had to try to remove the bronze disease and not scratch it. Does that make sense? Not
Yes.
scratch the bronze. So I'm going to make a point. Seems like I'm going off subject, but I'm kind of not. So hopefully this will work. But as I was cleaning around the rim of it, with the scraping the patina off and making sure there's no bronze disease underneath, hiding underneath the patina, you know. So I thought I scratched it, how Scott said when he saw the little 2x2, he said his heart butt pumped. When I
Yeah.
scratched the artifact, that's what it's like, oh my God. But since I still got to continue to clean it, it still needs that bronze disease. But guess what? It wasn't a scratch at all. There was hieroglyphs underneath patina.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
I don't, and oh yeah, of course everybody went crazy when they saw it. And of course, here is the situla. Look how large it is.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see
That's
the green
beautiful.
patina still in the inside.
Yeah.
Well, that's how thick it was. And then it had a darker blue. It kind of looks like, a pool cue that you
Yeah.
chalk it up. If Bronze disease looks like that when you scratch it, it's like, huh, like that, and you see that and you say, ooh, I need to protect this right away. And that's part of a curator's job. And so in treating it now, I don't know if you can see this at all, but it's right there on the rim. I'll move it
This,
back and forth.
yep, the smaller ones
Huh?
on the rim right above the
Can you see
depiction of
it?
the animals. I
Right
can
in
see
here.
smaller ones. Yeah.
Okay, all the way around. Look how fine that is.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is a uniform system of writing. And even though you can't translate it, or I couldn't translate it, I could say this is intentional.
Right.
This is crisp. These symbols represent hieroglyphs, right? But when we look at that curse tablet, you tell me I can't, I
Yeah.
don't know what we're seeing, buddy.
Yeah. And that's,
And
I've seen a few, and they're more critical reviews of the tablet, but I've seen a few of them show, they say, well, to Stripling's credit, yes, there does seem to be in early Hebrew or early Canaanite writing, there doesn't seem to be like you pointed out with the hieroglyphics, it doesn't seem to be a specific uniform, this is how you write this language. Sometimes it is right to left, sometimes it's left to right, up or down, and even very infrequently that as the ox plows back and forth. But the tablet does none of those. It's almost a
doesn't.
combination of all of them. And if we had several other inscriptions where you had a mixture of writing forms, you might be able to say, well, here's another one. But we don't. We do have right to left, we have left to right, we have up and down, but we don't have them all smashed together where you have to very subjectively choose when you go what direction. That was my issue with it, was it maybe it is a weird direction, but how do you know which direction it is,
Oh,
if any?
that's just part of it. I mean, there's other examples of proto alphabet. Proto, maybe they call it Sinaitic. It depends on where
Right.
it was discovered. But it was first discovered by Sir Flinders Petrie, I believe, in 1906 in the Sinai, which was actually a turquoise mine.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So there was a statement that was made, I think it was by Dr. Stripling, that scholars don't believe that Moses or Joshua had an alphabet to write with, so they couldn't write. Well, we've known about an alphabet now for 100 years.
Right.
So the real question wasn't if they had an alphabet. The question that secular scholars would really ask would be whether there was a Joshua or a Moses, not if there was an alphabet. I don't know if that
Right.
makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so when he's saying like we don't have an alphabet, dude, we got an alphabet. We've known about it for well over 100 years. Yes, there is the ability to be literate in the ancient world and in the late Bronze Age. It might be rare, but hey, you know what they just found? Well, it isn't just found, but it's been in the newspapers. Actually, it was found several years ago, and it's a ivory comb made of an elephant tusk. And guess what it has on it?
Is it lettering?
Proto-alphabetic. There's Proto-Canaanite. And on
Wow.
the comb, it actually tells you about is to be used to comb your beard. And the other side has very fine teeth, and is to remove your lice. And it's the
Good
very
lice.
first sentence. It's the very first sentence in, I'll just say Proto-Canaanite.
Okay.
So we do have it, and it's not meandering across the comb. It's in
Right.
an order. But this is neat too, because we all you ever write a letter, and then as you're writing the letter or on the envelope, you run out of space.
Yeah.
So you start trying to make things fit. Like it gets a
Yep.
little smaller, or you go up a little bit. They did the same thing with the comb. Yes, the letters are there, and it can be it's readable. And I think one of the peer review was actually Christopher Rolston.
Oh wow.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's been peer reviewed before they hit the press, which of course is important. So here at the same time where we're reading about the Darius inscription that
Right.
kind of fell through, The
Right.
lead tablet, once again, very disappointing. Here all along, we did have the first proto alphabet inscription, but it just was in the shadow of everything else. And I
Yeah.
thought that's just a shame, just a
Yeah.
shame that we did have something. Well, it's out there. Hopefully, people will kind of like bring it back to the surface because, we knew about this installation, Joshua's altar, for 40 years.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's revived. It's like a pair of Croc shoes. It's revived. I
Yeah.
don't know how, but it's interesting. But it just comes to show you maybe we'll have more information on this comb. But I just wanted to just throw that out there. That some really cool stuff has happened in archaeology in the Near East. Not everything was disappointing, you know.
No, no, no,
We've got some
definitely.
inscriptions.
This shouldn't be a black mark on archaeology at all. I think it should be. I think it should be a moment for, like you mentioned earlier before we started recording. Um, I think evangelicals, Christians, secularists, regardless, should, even if you're excited about something and you really want to agree with it, to review the evidence, listen to opposing opinions, listen to opinions that are for it, and to make your opinion based on all of that. And then instead of just saying, I want it to be X, therefore I'm going to make it X. Because
Okay,
even
let
when I
me ask you.
posted,
Okay, I'm
uh,
sorry, but Joshua, you did a 180 on it.
I did.
How did you feel? How did you feel when you at first you were very excited, and then you got us? Did you slowly change your mind, or did you just all of a sudden say, "Nope, this just ain't happening"? How did it come across for you?
Um, so I was very excited. I personally do not ascribe to the documentary hypothesis, or at least a more critical view of the formation of the Pentateuch in Scripture. We don't have to get into that, but so when I heard them talk about the name Yahweh being inscribed, this is one of the earliest inscriptions of it, or you have Yahweh and El, or at least the forms of them together. Like, great, that's fantastic. This would be exactly what we're looking for. Um, so I had very high hopes for this, and then as we got further in and they released it, that's the first two words I was looking for on this tablet. And when you're looking at the tablet, I say, I don't, where is this? It's like, that's the thing he said was the most clear. At least that's what
Right.
people were saying. And so I had to look at the drawing to find it. And I was trying to compare it with the scans they provide, and I couldn't find the names. In the drawing, you can see it, and the direction of those letters aren't the worst. Some of the others you actually are going left to right and then back to right and down. And I'm like, that, I don't know why you'd read it that way. But those two are pretty much diagonal, and I could read those. But everything else, the way they interpret it, I'm like, it just doesn't seem clear enough to me. And so that's why I said at this moment, I am not going to align myself with their interpretation of what writing might be there. I just
Sure.
don't think there's enough evidence to meet the fanfare of what they said there was. Again, it could be, but at the moment, I don't see it, and I'm okay with that. I don't think that. I think maybe if some people are saying, "Well, it has to be to prove the Bible to me," I don't need this one way or the other.
Right.
It would be very nice. It'd be very exciting, and I was excited, but that's okay. There are plenty of other things, and I think, like I said, you need to be willing to be wrong. And I think I respect someone more if they're saying, you know what, this is what I thought it was, and doing more research, I was wrong. And, I'm going to keep moving. That shows someone who is not just going to read their bias into everything. Everyone has bias, and you need to be willing to admit that. But I learned at a fairly young age that um, being wrong is okay. Is actually, you want to be wrong so you can get your viewpoint more in line. You learn where you need to grow when you're like that. Otherwise, you're just
right.
concrete.
You know, that's interesting because in the past 30, 40 years, how many times has the Noah's Ark been found? How many times has the
Yeah.
Ark of the Covenant been found?
Yes.
Or the Red Sea crossing, the chariot wheels and all that. And this is what gets me is that we got so well, it's a lot easier to get information now because of the internet. And
Yes.
and scholars can be very gracious when you contact them. I mean, years ago, this is many years ago, when I first started, I thought I was being very clever when I identified this type of pottery. It's from the Middle Bronze Age and it's from the Hyksos period and it's called, as first named by Sir Flinders Petrie, it's called Tel El Yehuda ware. All right. Funny name. But the thing is I thought, and it's got a stipple pattern on it. It's very unique. So when these people seem to arrive in the land and take over at least the trade route, the Northern Nile Delta and along the coastal plain of Canaan. And I thought, wow, I think I've identified this Tel El Yehuda ware with the people called the Hyksos. I was excited.
Yeah.
And so I sent, I think this is years ago. She probably don't even remember. I sent a little email to Dr. Jody Magnus. And she was very gracious, and she pointed out a book. And it was by Ruth Amaran. I think it's 1960. 1960. I don't think there's a color picture in the book. But anyway, and she gives me the page and the paragraph, and here in very academic, in this book on ancient pottery, the author actually stated that in this period, in this Middle Bronze Age period, she identified it with the Hyksos. So here I thought something was new. And yet, what I thought was something they already knew for the past 40, 50 years.
Yes.
That's peer review. And the thing is that, so I learned it without stepping out and saying something and people going, we known that for a long time,
Yep.
There's graciousness above scholars. I believe if we respect that, respect their position. You know why they're professors at universities? Because they deserve to be. That's why they're there. Now here's some statements that were made on the web. If you don't mind, I'll read them. You probably already have. Dr. Dan McClellan?
Yes.
He goes by the website, Dr. Dan McClellan. On this tablet, he just said, the lead tablet, he said, it's wishful thinking.
Yep.
Dr. Robert Cargill, he had 4 episodes, pretty extensive on the lead tablet, And he basically said, well, this is going to be paraphrased. There's nothing there. And then I call this guy the most beloved Egyptologist in America, Dr. David Falk. You got to love his program. At first, I thought, man, who is this dude? He's talking archaeology and he's eating popcorn at the same time.
Yeah.
I actually took his channel off. I said, man, this kid, that's silly, And then somebody said, hey, have you listened to this guy? And I thought, well, then I forgot. And I went back to the channel. He's talking about the Exodus, and it was so informative. And I said, this is the guy that was eating popcorn. I said, I was judgmental. I was very judgmental. So now I call him America's most beloved archaeologist. And he used the term pareidolia. I mean, he's like seeing images in the cloud.
Yeah, or like the ink blotches.
Yeah, Dr. Chris Rolston, okay, the most renowned epigrapher, actually called, this is what he called the Rorschach test. That's the images you're talking about. So, if I had this situla right here and I sent it out to these gentlemen, and for peer review, before I say anything, translate it for me, will you? So the museum, and I'll give you credit, which I have. I sent one artifact over to Dr. Rami Arav. I think it's the University of Omaha, Nebraska, years ago. He translated it and he kept it at the university for years and years and years. He's so proud of it, And so they're very gracious, these scholars, and they're more than helpful. I said, I send this out, and I know you can't see it on here. I was disappointed. I wish you guys could see this inscription because I was going to actually try to provoke Dr. David Falk. I said, "Hey, buddy, I don't know him that well. I just call him Dr. Falk." I said, "You see this right here? Do me a favor. I don't know if you can, but you think you could translate that? Or how about this one? I bet you're a PhD. I bet you could translate this for me. Give it a try. Let me know." But it's interesting to be able, because of the internet and YouTube, to have all these scholars really out there to help us. And
Yes.
this is what I'm saying. You know, uh, that what if I do have the translation for this one? All right, it's written down, but there's nothing wrong with getting several translations.
Oh, absolutely. You should.
So I get several translations, and that's part of what we would call the peer review. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to
Right.
be in a journal. It's just saying, I want to be certain. I want to be accurate for the public. I want to be accurate for the people that I represent, the board of directors, the museum, or whoever. I want to be accurate. And when so many credible scholars say no,
Right.
and just like Jody Magnus said, well, we've known about that for a while. This tell Yehuda where but that's not bad that you found it, on
Right.
your own. You found that, but don't act like you claimed that.
Right.
And I said, I do. I said, I appreciate that, because that keeps me from going out and making some kind of a announcement that I thought was true, but not necessarily. If I did a little, just had enough, to get away from my self-centeredness to say, hey, what do you guys think?
Right.
And they tell me what's up. Save me some embarrassment, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. So, in my opinion, if this was my little doodad and I found it, oh man, I definitely want to, be known for it. That'd be like an Indiana Jones discovery, right?
Right. You think
But if I went, yeah, go ahead.
no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You'd think
Oh, go ahead.
you'd have I mean, he said he had, certain individuals who were each specialized. I'm talking about Dr. Stripling on his excavation, which is great. I mean, not everyone is able to know everything about every field. But like you said, you think that he would want additional opinions on the epigraphy, not just the one or two that he had kind of on staff for this excavation or the individuals he chose for it. I would like to say, I would like to send it out if people are willing. Hey, I found this. I think there's something written on here, but I want, we have what we think it is. We're not going to tell you yet. What's your unbiased thought on this? And then, pool them all together and say, okay, they agree, they don't agree. This guy's kind of in the middle, and pull your evidence and say, okay, it doesn't fit exactly what we thought originally, but here's what we do think. And there are plenty of articles that say just that. They say at first we thought it was something grand and it was going to rewrite this or that. But on second thought, we're not quite sure. We do think there's something here, but we need more study or whatever. Their conclusions are rarely it's this and it can only be this and this is, and it's not something that's normally going to change archaeology forever. It's those big grand statements often are too good to be true.
Something about peer review is not just that you get peer review. I got to get it from people, not just me. We have to look outside of our own Scooby gang.
Yes. Right.
If they're on the payroll of the museum, I can ask them, but that necessarily can't be my peer review because they're part of us. It's got to be outside source. And it has to be sources that, like you said, you agree with the I'm sorry. You don't necessarily subscribe to the documentary hypothesis. But if you were an epigrapher in that area, I would ask you anyway.
Yes.
And then I'd ask somebody else that is, familiar and likes the document. I'd ask them too. Male, female, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
I'm going to get as many different resources. And when somebody, Dr. Falk, man, he goes into research. I don't know how he gets it. I think he's a research assistant for Kenneth Kitchen. You ever read the book? The book Reliability of the Old Testament.
Yes.
That is like this freaking thick.
And it's on my shelf.
Oh, look at that. You go to one page, you got to flip it over, man. It's so intense. And it takes forever to go through. As a matter of fact, I just tackled it in subject matters, you
Yes,
know.
you kind of have to.
But he, he seems to. I think he was a research assistant for Kenneth Kitchen.
That's great.
So I tell you what, man, it's just like if he's going to check out something, look out because I think he's going to find it. For
Yes.
or against. And I sent him a little message, correspondence saying, "Wow, I wish you'd teach a course on how to do research." And I think it's important because it's just like all these different Noah's Ark and all these Ark of the Covenants and all these Red Sea crossings. And let's say, and it's sensational and it hits the pulpits and people go and they listen to this stuff and
Mhm.
then they find out later on it's not necessarily true. It'd be nice if our pulpits would be a little bit better protected.
Yes.
Because how many people, even to this day, if I say something like, what, they have not found the Ark of the Covenant, how many people would say, don't you know about Ron Wyatt? Where you
Right.
been? You know? And before that, what is the guy? His name is Vendel Jones. You ever heard of Vendel Jones?
No, I haven't.
He was looking for the apothecary from the temple, and he supposedly found it in a cave
Okay.
down by the Dead Sea. Randall Price wrote a book on The Stones Cry Out, and he mentions Vendel Jones. And Vendel Jones claimed that he was the character for Indiana Jones simply because his last name was Jones.
Ah,
But this stuff, at first, this was like 30 years ago, maybe more. I believed him. I believe, like he looked, he's a senior citizen. He looked like Indiana Jones. He's out there digging. He's covered in dirt. He's got people that follows him. He might even had a PhD, good enough for me. What did I know? So I thought, wow. And then, of course, somebody else that knew more, like Dr. Randall Price, he mentions like, well, wait a minute, like you did. You learn the facts, then you back up. And, I do think that's important that, we look for peer review, but also, we got to be careful that we just don't jump on the sensational bandwagon and subject the people, the laity, the people in the pulpit, to things that might hurt their faith,
right.
because who knows that they get very discouraged and say, hey, this kind of fell through. What else isn't true? You know?
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned Ron Wyatt and his supposed discovery of Noah's Ark. Actually, when I was I think just going into high school, so probably a freshman, um, I had gone to a Sunday school class, and we talked about topics like these. We were exploring different possible things of archaeology and apologetics, and one of them was Ron Wyatt's documentary. And I don't remember the individual teaching it was like, believe this, but it was more thought provoking. Like, what do you think about this? Which was good, but I was a high schooler and I was very much like, wow, they found Noah's Ark. And I remember doing a speech in speech class about it and everything. And it wasn't until college when I went so I studied geoscience for my undergrad.
Okay.
And on the whiteboard, I walk into class and on the whiteboard, we'd have different landforms and structures of geology on the board. My professor would put different pictures on them. And one of them was this folded rock formation it looked just like what Ron Wyatt says he found up on the mountains of Ararat. It's like, hold on a second. What is this? And we were learning about it's a plunging fold in the rock where rock layers they've been laid down flat, they get folded, and then it gets tilted. And so it's this think of, I don't have something here, like a piece of paper, like it's bent and then it gets rotated. And so you have this weird plunging half rolled piece of paper that gets cut on half. And so no, that's what you have is that eye shape he thought looked like a ship. Like that looks just like Noah's Ark. And so then I started doing more study. I actually looked into a few different Christian organizations and they said, yeah, it's most likely not Noah's Ark. And then they gave some good ideas about why. If and I think there was the flood. If there was a flood, all of the earth was inundated with water. No more forests. Nothing is there. Everything's gone. What are they going to build with? Like if you have 8 people, right? You have 3 breeding families and then Noah and his wife. they might stay on the ark, but as they populate, where are they going to get lumber? Where are they going to get tools and fuel and things like that? Probably the ark. So if it was there, it's no longer there. And then if there was anything left of it, people who were, they want to have artifacts, they would have traveled to Mount Ararat and probably torn it apart to use as medallions or pieces of their house, because that's what people, would take little icons and things.
Right.
It's not there anymore. We're not going to find it, even if, so I was like, I was so angry. I was very, very frustrated, not because I was wrong. I'm fine with that, but because I told other people that it was right. And so I was teaching them that. So I was very upset. And it's that point that I decided I'm never going to teach someone something unless I have a very good certainty about it. So when I make videos like about the curse tablet, I'm more than willing to say, no, I don't think that's what it actually turned out to be. I had high hopes for it, and that's not the evidence. Because of my past experience with things like this, I got caught up in that, and I was very excited about it. It's okay. It's okay if it's not. And I think we should not be dogmatic about those things.
That's interesting because years ago, I think it's maybe before my son was born, so it had to be 13 years ago. Dr. Eric Klein wrote a book, I believe it's titled Myths of the Bible. And he said, we should be looking for Noah's barn.
Yeah, I mean,
there you go. Same thing you're talking about. Yeah, same
it's
thing.
Not going to be there.
Yeah. Well, that might hurt some people's feelings.
That should not be what make or breaks your faith in a text.
Well, you know what? If I had all that wood, I would say, like, what am I going to do? Even if there were trees, am I going to cut down more trees? With what? With what kind of tools?
Yeah, it's already there.
So I'm going to tear that thing apart and make some houses or something, right?
That's what makes sense for me.
Right. Okay, let's go. And back to the first tablet. I pulled out some artifacts from the museum's collection because he mentioned it was in, I believe it was Scott Stripling answering your Mount Ebal questions, something like that.
Yeah.
And about 5 minutes in, he made a proclamation that he found what did he find?
The stylus.
An iron stylus. Now, actually, this is Roman period, but it's iron. It's hard to find iron. Why is it hard to find iron at an excavation? It rusts.
It oxidizes. Yep.
It rusts. And it's very, matter of fact, I had several bronze handles to swords and not much left of the sword in some cases because the iron rust. But this is actually an iron stylus from the Roman period. Now, it doesn't come down. Now, what the Romans did, they actually wrote in wax.
Okay.
Right. And then they probably use a seal ring and then seal it with the ring and then close it'd be like in a box. And they close it so it protects it. And that would be the arrangement. That would be the deal. All right. But they write with an iron stylus. But the thing is that the Iron Age begins 1200 BC. Now, it doesn't say on this particular day, this year, this month, this is the Iron Age.
Right.
Of course, 1200 BC would be beginning of, you could say, iron being used by people outside royalty. Because in King Tut's tomb, all right, this is 18th dynasty. So I forget the date of it. It's going to be something like what? 1320 BCE, around there. Which if I say 1320 BCE, and that's like 100 years before the actual Iron Age, but this is the ruler of the world.
Right.
And he has a gold dagger in his tomb, and he also has an iron dagger. This was actually made by Dr. Chris Udd. I'll give him the credit for it. It's pretty cool. This guy's pretty handy. He makes some really cool stuff.
I like that.
Yeah. But the thing is, it was actually made out of meteor ore. That's how rare it was.
Yeah, I think I've read about that. That would be quite an interesting piece to have.
So when we look at the claim that he found an iron stylus, and knowing that iron was so rare and valuable that it's found in a king's tomb, and really, I can't think of any other place offhand that far back. And to say they're going to make what the king made as a knife, you know, that they actually used iron to make a stylus. That's tough. 200 years before the Iron Age. Now, in archaeology, I'll tell you what that could be the equivalent to. It's like going to Gettysburg, which is Civil War,
Right.
and you're excavating at Gettysburg, and you come across a 747. You know, it's too much technology before the time, you know, and it seems simple that people would say, oh, an iron stylus, 1400 BC. Okay, but when we look at archaeology, we say, well, wait a minute. For the past 100 and some years, we still label the Iron Age like 12, maybe not quite 100, 1200 BC, with few exceptions, usually in royal tombs,
Right.
such as King Tut. All right. And that itself was not, you know, what we call forged. That was made out of, I could say, meteor ore. It's a little bit different than iron made later on in the 12th and 13th century later on, 12th, 11th century later on. So to make a statement that we got something that's 1400 BC and it's iron and it was used to write on a little stylus, where should we look at those 48 letters? We're down to what? Maybe a millimeter, so not even that each.
Yeah.
That's tough, buddy. That is really tough. Because iron, you know, maybe you can file it down to a point that's small, but I find it hard. That's all. And iron, that far back, 200 years before the Iron Age, that's a tough one too.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
The first thing that comes to mind is that kind of undoes, that puts it right back to what Zertal dated it. If you actually found an iron stylus, it actually brings it back closer. Also, if he wanted to keep the more 1400 BC date, all of the strata got dumped in an area. So how do you know, like, why would you also date that to be 1400 when it might not be? Because all the strata got dumped in a pile. It could have all got mixed. You know what I'm saying? And then lastly, you wouldn't need iron to write on lead. I mean, lead has a it's very soft. I think when you put it on the hardness scale, I think it's a 3. You could use probably bone, maybe some hardwoods. So you wouldn't need an iron stylus to do that. You could have something else that's relatively sharp to write on this. So I don't know why he found it and he was saying, well, this must be the stylus for it. I don't think that's required.
Anyway, he actually did say, it was 5 minutes into that program, he said, we found the stylus that was used to write the tablet. I go, my gosh, man, I lose pens every week.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's that one, especially, like I said, it's in a pile. Who knows if it's
in a pile, yeah.
That one or if it's something else.
He did date, it was a pottery that was a transitional pottery. We got like time dates don't start and stop like this.
Right.
It's gradual. So it was a pottery, not a fragment, but a pottery selection that was also talked about in an article in a comment by Dr. Bob Mullins, in which he claimed that this pottery would date into the late Bronze Age 1 period, or excuse me, late Bronze Age 2A period, 1400 BC, but also, even though rarely, does cross into the late Bronze Age 2B. All right. And Dr. Stripling mentioned that this is proof that it goes back to Iron Age 2A. And I said, well, that's not what the article said at all. He says it's rare. And rare does not mean it didn't. And not only that, I'd have to say, well, who is your peer review? I think the name was something like Levy. And Levy was on their team. So peer review of an article that's going to bring it back to the period that you desire.
Right.
Which is going to like substantiate your claim rather than Dr. Zertal's, is from somebody in your own Scooby gang.
Right.
Not good. And with so many scholars that will hit the internet now and YouTube, that's some dangerous stuff, man. You gotta be careful because they'll catch you. And what's another one? We got the iron. We got the, oh, that's like he's talking about one piece of pottery, one artifact out of 18,000. That's not good either. So you got like 17,999 that are late Bronze Age 2B, but this one thing that you suppose is validating your one out of 18,000. That's
Right.
not great either. But they're not going to tell you, but oh yeah, this is one out of 18,000. They're just going to say, hey, we have this. And then, you know, I'd have to say, was Bob Molas misquoted or just failed to say that word that possibly, maybe,
Right. Right.
rarely. That's important too. Um, so I don't want to, let's see, dominate the conversation because I was very interested in the fact that you did change your mind. Was very interesting, which, I have to give it to your credit because I'll tell you what, really the evidence against the inscription with all these major, major scholars
Right.
is overwhelming. It just is. And I gave just a few quotes because it can go on and on and on,
Yes.
you know. Um, and you come out and you actually said, to your own credit, not that you were wrong, but that this is what you believe now. How many programs, how many pastors, how many podcasts, after seeing these scholars and seeing the evidence, won't do what you did? And we'll just let it ride because you might say I'm being judgmental because it's sensational. You know,
Yeah.
I believe it's for us to do the right thing, you know, like any one of these pieces of pottery that I showed you, even the bronze. If somebody told me this is the translation and somebody else said, no, 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 you're wrong. And I said, well, tell me what you think it is. And I said, I had a couple books written by Petrie and I did the translation myself. And he says, well, that was a good job. However, you missed this, you know, you missed the determinatives in the hieroglyphs. Well, what's the determinative? And now I learned something. I was wrong, but I learned something as well. Um, I think I'll tell you what this lead tablet did. It made a lot of us study.
Yeah.
It made us a lot of study of like, what is this proto-alphabet? What is a defixia? Is a defixia, I'm from New Mexico, so a lot of people speak Spanish here. So defixio is a male curse, and a defixia is a female curse. Just joking.
No,
But
I appreciate your words about that. It's something that I definitely think that it's been instilled in me, even at college. I've been taught never believe someone and what they have said just because of who they are, whether they are your pastor, your professor, your mom or your dad, or whomever. That doesn't mean you disrespect their authority or their position. I mean, you should take what they have to say, but you don't just immediately have blind faith in that statement. So even when I was in college, I was hearing some things that I had not heard before. I had been taught a more traditional Christian faith, and I heard some things in scholarship that I'd never heard before. And I said, I need sources. I need more than a 1 credit hour, presentation on this, and just my Old Testament survey book. I need the scholars' books. I need to go read what they wrote and understand it, and I want to analyze it. And then I'm going to go read the opponents of that and hear what they have to say on
right.
critiquing that hypothesis or whatever the theory might be. And then I'm going to make my own decision. And I think there are many students, whether they are much older or they were my age, like around their early 20s, that because it's a professor or because it's someone who has a PhD or because it was their pastor, whomever it might be, because it's them, they believe it. Especially if it
Right.
is going to line up with their view. Like you said, it's more sensational. I can't do that. I just can't do that. I've been wrong too many times before, and I want to make sure, especially on these things, if I'm going to tell someone or teach someone, especially on my YouTube channel or at a church, I better be right, or at least right enough that I can say, here's all the evidence for it. This is why I believe this way on this topic. And that's what I've always done. And so this was no different. I wanted to make sure, yes, this sounds really, really good. And then when the publication came out, I read it myself. I read it a couple times, and then I looked up, like you just said, doing some research. What is dysphyxia? What is tomographic scanning? What are all these different things? And then I listened to multiple podcasts, multiple YouTube channels, Dr. Stripling himself, people like yourself. I wanted to make sure I had a well-rounded thought about it. And then I made my next video on this is what I think about it now. And I think we need to do that with every single topic. And we need to be very, very aware of our own thoughts and willing to change those. And that's my philosophy on studying something.
That was, as I would say, the correct way to do it, because in my years in the field, like identifying artifacts.
Yeah.
When I first started off, I asked a lot of questions, and so there's been occasions where I go back to the museum and move artifacts on a shelf from one period to the next.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, even scholars will differ in opinions.
Absolutely.
So I have one scholar, a good scholar, if you read their book, you'll say, oh, wow, I think they're right. And then you'll have another scholar talking about the same subject, and they'll have their point of view. And they're so good, you think, I think they're right. And you're looking at yourself, it's like, oh my gosh. I said, it's getting confusing up in this place here.
Yep.
And it was kind of like that with archaeology and sometimes with artifacts. I have one scholar go to the museum. I said, if you see anything that you question, here's a funny one for you. I wish I still had this artifact, And the individual's name is David Hendon. And he's from Nyack, New York. He's retired now, but he is an expert. He's got a number of books out on biblical coins.
Okay.
All right. So if I had biblical coins, I needed questions, and I go to Mr. David Hendon. And he also was very knowledgeable on ancient oil lamps. So I had in the museum, we had about 200 different oil lamps going all the way to, I think, Chalcolithic period, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, he's eyeballing it, and then he just stops and he's looking, and he's at the Byzantine period, and it's this really cool bronze lamp, It even had a what we call cryo, the PX.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it had little attachments where you could hang a chain.
Okay.
But it also had what we call a ring base, so you could sit it down on the surface and it'd be level. So it had the ring base as well. And he took a look at that. He's looking from side to side, and he says, bring that out right there and let's take a look at it. And he says, it doesn't make sense to have a ring base if you're hanging it. He goes, now he's not going to say this is the fake. He goes, I think this one has problems. So I don't know if you ever been in the Army. We call it Neverdol. That's what we shine our brass with back then. It's called Neverdol. And we take it and you got a piece of cloth and you rub the Neverdol on your bronze or brass. And I saw, you know what? This is a fake. I'm not going to worry about the patina. I'm going to take it down to see, what it is. What's underneath the patina. See? Yeah. They can use a fake patina to hide it. You're going to like this one. So anyway, I was cleaning it, and I cleaned it, and then I soaked it in some solution. So it was bright and shiny like a new penny. Yeah. It was disgusting. And I flipped it over on the bottom because he said, that's the questionable part. Why is that ring there? And this is a big bronze lamp. It looked like one of those that you can get a genie out of it.
Yeah.
And I turned it over, and guess what it had on it? It actually had writing.
Oh, wow.
Readable writing. And you think, oh, wow. No, all wrong. It said made in Japan. Yeah. So there you go. It made a nice paperweight for years.
Man.
But I pulled that out. I pulled it out among all. What do you think? Over 200 lamps, we got fooled by one, and that happens. But you admit, I got fooled We laugh and go on, say, I put that on my desk. You know why? Lesson learned.
Absolutely.
Lesson learned.
And now you
Luckily, the
know.
museum did not pay a ton of money for it. I thought, like, oh, good. It looks really good. It was really awesome if it was real, but it was made in Japan. And what they did is they took a Byzantine lamp, an authentic Byzantine lamp, and made a mold of it, and then
Okay.
cast it in bronze, the top part. So that's what I was looking at with the cryo. All right. Then they took a lamp, probably something like a genie lamp, took the top off of it, and poured that one. That was the bottom, and they kind of like
Okay.
soldered them together.
Yeah.
That's how they fit them together. Oh, brother, man, that was funny. So there you go. Peer review.
Yeah. That's a form of it. That's a fun story.
So live and learn. That one was a mistake, and of course I hate it. I said, the whole time I'm cleaning it, I'm thinking, I hope it's not fake. I hope it's not fake. This is really cool. Just like the lead tablet.
Yeah.
I hope it's real. I hope it really says, you know, the sacred name, and it's found on Mount Ebal. I hope it is, but when you clean it up and look at the detail and have peer review, you know, and this guy was not on my payroll. Matter of fact, I paid him to come and do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
Because he was the expert. And even, I'm sure when you pay somebody, they want to tell you everything is, hey, you're doing a really good job, man. You're the best. I've never seen anybody like you. You're the most awesome curator ever seen. And I would say, shoot, man, give the man a tip. But instead, he pulls this lamp out. I think it's absolutely cool. It says, this one's got problems. And he was right. We got a lead tablet that's got some problems,
Yeah.
but oh well. It's too small to make a paperweight.
Well, he says he's going to have another publication.
I think he said
Uh,
on the outside surface of it, you got some more letters and stuff, but
yeah.
okay, okay. But unfortunately, we've seen quite a bit already.
Well, that's I so going over what some people have commented on my video.
Right?
Um,
Okay.
they've they've had some other suggestions. Many of them I are reading in between the lines. Um, and several of the people who are commenting on it will admit that. They're like, there's no evidence for this, but this could be one way. So some people think the different shapes and the reason why it's written the way it is because you have multiple hands who are all signing this sort of document. Again, possible, but there's no evidence for it. And so I'll even say that, like, sure, if you had, let's say you had like three people's names at the bottom or something, then you could say, well, look, but we don't. So I said, maybe. Again, you can't be dogmatic about that at all. Another person said they were actually using high resolution photos and they were editing the photos that they've been given and looking at the GIF, the high resolution GIF, and looking at that, and they were actually able to see some more letters than what you could see just from the low resolution two scanned photos from the article. I said, well, maybe that's the case. I said, like you said, I hope so. I unfortunately can't do that study, and I'm hoping they say they have high resolution photos. Dr. Stripling's team does. I'm sure they do with the type of technology they use to scan this. I hope they release those because currently they've kind of left us in the air saying, I don't see this. And so if they do have a second publication, I really, really hope there's a lot more photos. Otherwise, I'm not going to budge. I'm going to, like you said, we have a tablet that has some problems. So we'll see. We'll see if there's any more to come or if it's going to stay where it's at.
Oh, very well. So yeah, why not? So, but there's like some more wait and see. We had a year before the publication
Yeah.
came out. So, yeah, I did read about that too, that there's supposed to be a second publication coming out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm more than willing to, as I was, to change my opinion if he has evidence that for some reason he didn't provide the first time, let's see it. I mean, absolutely, let's provide it. And I'm hoping that the reasoning why is the journal he chose was more interested in the science of the scanning, and that's very clear. That's what they wanted to do. The first article is focused on that. Maybe the second article will be focused more on epigraphy and the impressions of the letters. I hope so, and that gets some more peer review of epigraphers and not just more. Here's some drawings that we have of poor impressions. I'm hopeful, but at the same time, I'm not going to change unless it's really good.
Yeah, that's true. I told you that me and Dr. Stripling did some classes together at Trinity Southwest University. Yeah. So, uh, a little bit familiar with the gentleman. I remember driving to the airport. I didn't know he lived in Texas. That's a long way to come for classes. But okay, I wondered, like, wow, he got to fly to come to TSU classes, But I remember him classes years ago, and he really has come a long way. I'm surprised, and the amount of excavation he's done. I know it was Tel El MacArthur, I believe. It's BAR's proposal for a biblical eye, the conquest city after Jericho, where they lost the first battle because somebody stole some items in Jericho.
Achan,
then he was digging for years at Tel El Hammam, that's Trinity Southwest, hypothesis of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I believe they see the city as being destroyed by a meteor.
Okay.
So I know he's been doing, and then also the temple sifting. What is it? The program, temple sifting program. What is it? It's where they take the dirt that was taken from the temple when they were doing restoration and they were building. Oh man, this might be like 15, 16 years, and they're moving the dirt to the Kidron Valley.
Yeah.
There's a story behind this one too. Like I said, it's 15 some years ago, and I went to Israel, and I was visiting one of the antiquity dealers there. His name is Sammy Taha, very nice gentleman. And I wanted to go exploring in the Kidron Valley because there's tombs there, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to take some close-up pictures. Now there's a lot of graffiti. It's just sad. But and I had another idea. I told Sammy, I said, you know what? How many people come to Israel? No, let me back up. I said, you know what? I said, I read in BAR, Biblical Archaeological Review, they were taking dump truck after dump truck and from the remains of the excavation, I shouldn't say excavation, but the building program they had at the temple, and they're dumping it into the Kidron Valley. I said, I'd like to go there and just get the dirt. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He says, now, why in the world would you do that? I said, Sammy, how many tourists come to Israel and get water from the Jordan?
Yeah.
And the water is really pretty contaminated. And it's not the water. It's like you sell all these tourist little bottles, like 50 cents a piece, millions. And his eyes lit up like this. I said, we get one of those little ivory boxes and we just get bags and bags of dirt. And we put Temple Mount dirt in those little boxes. And man, I'm retiring. This will be big.
Yeah.
So now in that area on the other side is Silwan, the city of Silwan, the village of Silwan, which is basically West Bank, Palestinian. So he looks at me and he says, hey, George, he goes, I was dressed like in brown pants, brown shirt, and he says, you got to put a Mickey Mouse shirt on because you look too much like military.
Oh.
And if you're in that area, somebody's going to hit you in the head with a rock. And he goes, look at this. This is graciousness. He said, I'm gonna send my son with you. And he was just a teenager. He says, as you're going through there and exploring and taking pictures, he goes, my son will go with you as a translator so you don't get into any trouble. He says, and also, if you're going to go not excavate, but if you're going to go collect dirt from what was removed from the Temple Mount, he said, I'm going to call the IAA to make sure there's not going to be any situations. I said, cool, why not? So I had my little flip cell phone that goes back, a flip cell phone
Yeah.
like this, like Star Trek, and it rings, and I'm in Kidron Valley with his son. Ring, ring. I said, Sammy, what's up? What's up? He goes, George, he goes, I got to tell you this. He goes, are you anywhere around that dirt? And I said, no. He said, I talked to IAA and they said if they find you anywhere close to that, they're going to arrest you.
Oh, oh no.
But, oh, this is the Temple Mount Sifting Society or something. I think it was established by Professor Gabriel Marquet. He found the silver scroll at the Katofinom.
Oh yeah.
So here, my idea wasn't that far off so many years ago to go through that there'd be something there. But I was just, honestly, I was just after the dirt. As you know, my theory was to put it in the box, just like the water. And I
Yep.
thought it was a really cool idea. But you might call Sammy Taha peer review. He said, yeah, let him see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
I'm only 5'8". I'm too small to go to jail, man. So let's see what time it is. Oh, we got a few more minutes. So, sir, how do you want to close this out? What would you like to say about the tablet in general? And let me ask you this. Let's get together for another podcast in the future when you
Okay.
get time.
Absolutely.
We'll find a topic, or maybe you want to pick a topic and something that comes up, and we'll discuss it and have a lot of fun. All right.
Sounds good.
All righty, sir. I appreciate your time. So, give us some thoughts of what you found out about the cursed tablet, and then through the peer review, and just sum it up here in a few minutes, if you would, if you're comfortable with that.
Sure. Yeah. I think the cursed tablet and the whole publication about it definitely brings an awareness to making sure you do your own research, and not to always immediately believe a headline. And that goes with anything just as much as it does with this. But also, I think it's a good moment to research. I think it's a good moment to learn some more about archaeology if you don't know. Even I think archaeologists who are not familiar with this particular idea of a defixio or this region of Israel, it was a good moment for people to learn and to come together and to talk about this. I heard more critical scholars, and I heard maybe some more traditional evangelical scholars echoing each other, which is rare, is very rare on a topic. And so they were discussing, and it was relatively peaceful. And they may disagree on every other topic. They came together and looked at the evidence and said, I think we're going to agree on this. And that was wonderful. I'm glad that there was some good discussion that came out of this. I think it also kind of gives some more confidence towards individuals seeking, how would I publish things? I think people were worried that this is going to give way to people publishing things and getting around peer review. More people are going to do this. I think it might go the other route. I think it might show you do need to seek out peer review. You do need to seek out the opinions of other scholars, whether you think they're going to agree with you or not. And so I think it only further solidified my philosophy on that. And I think it has helped others to see that as well. And I hope it continues to. And overall, it's biblical archaeology in the realm of Israel, or anything that discusses a possible narrative or story from the Bible, is always exciting to me. Always is exciting.
And you're going to be aired on our channel, and so your YouTube is called
The Geologian.
The Geologian on YouTube. Joshua Woodard, right?
That's correct.
Woodard. Okay. And you got a diploma behind you. Are you on a master's degree, or where are you at? Or you finished your bachelor's, or where are you at with your degrees?
Oh, I have an undergrad in geoscience from Olivet Nazarene University, and I have a master's in Old Testament studies from Biola University.
Right. From Biola. Great. Yeah. And let me ask you, how old are you?
I'm 27.
Well, you're doing great, and you got your YouTube channel going, and really much success to you, sir. I like what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you came on strong for something, and then you made a decision based on peer review, And you know what? I think it's a it's a way that I think other uh, YouTubers that are dealing with academic structures and archaeology and artifacts should also do it. Not just okay, you were for it and you ran on the sensationalism, and then when it kind of fell through, you let the people hang, you
Right.
know, and let them think what they will. You know, we found the Ark of the Covenant. Well, you didn't. You found Noah's Ark. Well, we didn't. You know, but you come back and you tell them what you thought. You told them your heart, and kudos to you, sir.
Thank
All
you.
right, you have a great day. Appreciate your
You
time.
too. Thanks for having me.
More than welcome.